A comparison between Umar and Paul is instructive to see how their worldviews changed when they embraced their respective religions. They are a good comparison because they have a couple things in common. They were both early followers of their respective prophets, Jesus and Muhammad, and they both initially persecuted people, holding the faith they later came to embrace. Paul, for example, persecuted Christians prior to his conversion, but Saul was ravaging the church and entering house after house, and he dragged off men and women and committed them to prison. Before accepting Islam, Umar likewise persecuted Muslims. Bukhari 69:42, I heard Sa'id bin Zaid saying, "I have seen myself tied and forced by Umar to leave Islam." How did these men change after their conversions to Islam and Christianity, respectively? After Paul's conversion to Christianity, he baffled his contemporaries by preaching peacefully in support of the Christian message, the followers of which he had previously abused. They remarked, "Is this not he who in Jerusalem destroyed those who called on his name?" Paul expressed deep regret over persecuting the church, saying, "For I am the least of the apostles, because I persecuted the church of God." Paul was later persecuted and imprisoned himself for spreading the Christian message. "I am in chains for Christ," he remarked in Philippians 1, "and I have been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, and faced death again and again." After converting, Paul embraced a message of peace. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. What about Umar? How did he change after his conversion to Islam? It is extremely clear from the Sahih that he continued his calloused, bullying, and even murderous ways among both the believers and unbelievers. His character didn't change. It was simply redirected and reinforced by his authority as the so-called chief of believers. Let's look at some examples. Umar was extremely harsh even to the early Muslims. I listened to his recitation and noticed that he recited it in several different ways, which Allah's Messenger had not taught me. I was about to jump over him during his prayer, but I controlled my temper, and when he had completed his prayer, I put his upper garment around his neck and seized him by it, and said, "Who taught you this surah, which I heard you reciting?" So I dragged him to Allah's Messenger. The Venerable Ibn Abbas doesn't seem to have a favorable opinion of Umar's disposition. For 1 year, I wanted to ask Umar about the two women who helped each other against the Prophet, but I was afraid of him. Some women Muhammad was talking to rapidly changed their composure when they heard the sound of Umar's voice. The Prophet said, "I am astonished at these women who were with me. As soon as they heard your voice, they hastened to screen themselves." And then Umar turned towards them and said, "O enemies of your souls, you are afraid of me and not of Allah's Messenger?" The women replied, "Yes, for you are sterner and harsher than Allah's Messenger." The Ethiopians frequently put on shows and displays in the mosque for Muhammad and his companions. Bukhari 29:01, while this was occurring, Umar came in, picked up a stone, and hit them with it. When Umar observed people praying after the Asr prayer, which was against the tradition of Muhammad according to his understanding, he would strike their hands. Unlike Paul, Umar was all for chopping off heads. When a man accused Muhammad of being unjust, Umar said, "O Allah's Messenger, allow me to chop his head off." When Ibn Sayyad professed to Muhammad some knowledge of end times, Umar said to Muhammad, "Allow me to chop off his neck." Ibn Sayyad at the time was a boy nearing puberty. During a dispute between the Ansar and immigrants, Abdullah bin Ubay allegedly said he wanted to expel the less honorable Muslims who had immigrated from Mecca to Medina. You can probably guess Umar's response by now. "O Allah's Messenger, let me chop off the head of this hypocrite." When your caliph thinks about organizing his troops while he's praying, when he continues Muhammad's practice of raiding unsuspecting towns and communities, it is no wonder the early believers said, "We have been powerful since Umar embraced Islam." Notice it says we have become powerful, not we have become peaceful. But that's exactly what Paul preached after his conversion, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And finally, something else Paul said that Umar could never have. "What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." So Umar and Paul both persecuted people of different faiths prior to their conversion. After his conversion, Paul expressed regret, preached a message of peace, and was willingly imprisoned and persecuted for his faith. Umar remained a harsh, unrepentant bully and violent zealot, willing even to chop the head off of a youth who insulted Muhammad. This brief comparison, to which much could be added regarding the cruelty of Umar, is very condemning of Islamic ideology, which effected no change in the pre- and post-Islamic Umar, who was free to indulge his violent whims with the authority of his position as the second rightly guided caliph.